All right, we got another, what I think I'm going to start calling a comedy community bonus episode with Chica Oroko and Juan Ciez. These are two, I think, very funny and very just sweet, genuine people. I actually think people will really like this episode. They're just both good people. I would suggest looking into their comedy very much. There is a point though where so it's going to be Chica first, and then it's going to be Juan Ciez. If you listen to Juan Ciez, there's going to be a point where he references another comedy community episode, and he's referencing what another comedian said. So just for context, when you hear him, he's talking about bonus episode Get to Know Your Comedy Community with Nick Lanni and William Bradford Holland. So he's referencing what William Holland was saying. If you've not listened to the episode, there's very few words to describe William Holland, and yet he says so many words. So so when you listen to Juan Ciez, if you want context for what he's talking about, just listen to that episode with William Holland, and you'll get you'll get what he's saying. Um, yeah, okay, so I guess that's about it. So I really like doing these. It's nice to hear from people and hear about how different comics are doing and all of that. So I'm gonna hopefully try to keep doing these every Friday if I can get in contact with comics to do it. And if you know any that want to do it, just send them my way. All right, get to know your comedy community with Chica Oroko and Juan Ciez.
Okay, so why I started comedy? I think for me, it just kind of started off with writing. For personal, I was just like, oh hey, I think I'm funny. I think I can make people laugh because I've been doing that. And I think from the storytelling perspective, I it was more so that I'm like I have stories to tell, and I think I can tell a great story. Because when I was younger, I wanted to be a doctor and a writer, and now I'm a nurse and a comic, aspiring comic. So it's like, yeah, I've changed. I haven't changed that much. Because even before doing comedy, it was maybe I'll do a blog, maybe I'll write a book, maybe I'll do short stories, maybe poetry, maybe I'll have a YouTube and I'll do commentary. But it was always rooted in the idea of storytelling. But then comedy was the thing that I wanted to do. And I'm like, I can be great at this if I really have confidence. If I really work on it, I know I can be great at this thing. So I finally did it 10 years later than like in high school. Like 15, 16, I wanted to do it. My sister and I would always riff off. We were living in Illinois at the time. And I know she wanted to go to Second City. And I was like, maybe I'd like to go to Second City too. We never did, but it was something that we had planned. And I would say, who inspired me to do comedy? I think early on, it was mostly there's a lot of goofy people on TV, like the Jamie Foxx show and like Martin Lawrence. Those were things I'm like, oh yeah, I like to be a funny person. And like SNL and Mad TV and like doing skits. Other comics, I would say I have an appreciation for Maria Bamford, Patrice O'Neill. I think Godfrey is an underrated comic. He makes me laugh, even like on stage and then like off the cuff. He's just like a funny person to me. I think he's way underrated. Anyone else? I'm sure there's other comics that inspire me. But yeah, I'd say Godfrey, Patrice O'Neill, Maria Bamford. I appreciate what she does with how she tells her stories. My worst bomb story. Okay, so imagine like an indoor weed flea market in San Bernardino County. So yep, so I know it's a great imagery. So I'm getting up there and I'm doing my set, and I already knew I'm like this isn't gonna go great because people are high, they're not really paying attention. Some people are drunk. There's music playing in the background while I'm doing my sets, and even the host, was like, "Hey, can you turn the music down?" And like no one cared. So I'm like, "Okay, this is cool." Um, so it was like people are like like the three people that were in the audience that were paying attention in the front that could actually hear, they were laughing. So I had at least the three out of the other 30 people that were in there paying attention. So then I remember I did a joke where no one was really paying attention, and then I did like a diss San Bernardino, and then everyone was like, "Ooh!" and now they're paying attention. So it's like, okay, when I was doing my other stuff, you guys didn't hear, but now all of a sudden you get dissed, and now you hear everything, whatever. So then the music is playing, people are high, people are smoking, people are trying to sell products. So the venue wasn't the most supportive, but I did it just for the sake of doing it. And then I got done with my set, and this lady Like I said, okay, thanks for my time, so everyone knew I was done. And then she starts yelling, "Get off the stage!" It's like, lady, I'm already done. Like the show is already ended. We're good. And it was just one of those locations where I was thinking I could get stabbed in this parking lot, and people would be like, "It's a regular Tuesday, so have a good night."
Hey, Aaron Chase's podcast. Juan Cias here. Glad to be on here. Volunteering my time, you guys. Just got off of work. I parked in front of my house. Still in my death van. Got the AC on. So, this is one of the few chances I have to record this. Even though there's no comedy, I still stay pretty busy with stuff, man. It's been crazy with the COVIDs and all this shit. I literally just got another call right now. This is probably like our 20th COVID case, man. It's been crazy. So, not a ton to talk about that. We're going to talk about other stuff. Uplifting, funny stuff, I guess. So he had two questions, like my intro into comedy, like how did I get into comedy, what made me want to do comedy. So I guess I'll answer that one first. I guess like what happened with me. So I'm Juan Cias, if you don't know. I'm the Undertaker of comedy. Yuck yuck. I pick up dead people for a living. Been doing that for a long time, and that's kind of what, in a roundabout way, led me into my first time doing comedy. Now, I've always wanted to do comedy since I was younger. I've always kind of admired comedians. For me, one of my early comedians that I really admired was Bill Cosby, before all the stuff. And so I've always enjoyed it, but I never really kind of knew how to get into it or any way about doing about it. So I would always write, do a lot of that stuff, but eventually I fell into the line of work of mortuary, and I fell in love with it. Like I really fell in love with the line of work, but eventually it did lead to a lot of depression. I kind of was always really a naturally depressed person, and the mortuary stuff kind of added to it sometimes subconsciously. And one of the places I was working at, I had full housing, and they paid for my utilities and everything, so I had a lot of extra income. So when I had that extra income, I wanted to start seeing a therapist for my depression. And it was during one of my appointments with the therapist, like it just came out, I just said it, I've always wanted to try comedy. And he was just like, well, why don't you? And I was like, what? And he was just like, yeah, I was like, because you need like agents and stuff. You need people, you need the connections and whatnot. He was like, now you can just try an open mic. I was like, why didn't I ever think of that? Of course, open mics. And I was like, where do I find these? So I'll just look up online. And he looked up online for me, and he's like, look, I found something right here. And I was like, holy shit. And so like, that was what led me to my first time doing it. I remember finding the LA Comedy Bureau. If you don't know that website, check it out. It's a good spot for open mics out in LA. Unfortunately, nothing in the Inland Empire. They don't like the Inland Empire, apparently. That's fine. That's another podcast. But I used that utility, and I found an open mic somewhere, and I went and tried it, and I fell in love with it immediately. I had a really good set my first time around. I got really lucky. It was at Flappers. I guess that's why it received so well, maybe. But it was at Flappers Burbank on a weekend. I never forget. It was the host Frank Cronin, and it was a great first time. I did really well, but I got into it because, like I said, I was really depressed, and I just wanted to start talking, and because like I said, I always wanted to do comedy. I feel like I had a good sense of humor. I always enjoyed writing, so I wanted to kind of start utilizing that, because when I would meet with families, one of the things I do is I write a lot of obituaries, and some of those stories were really interesting. Like I had one, just you get all kinds of crazy stories, man. And like one of the stories that I had that really affected me was like, I asked, what kind of hobbies and what things did he enjoy? And they just said, well, you just kind of watch TV. You didn't really do much of anything. And so I was like, okay, and I realized, fuck, that's like me outside of work. And I was like, I don't want that to be the only thing I'm known for. Like, I gotta make another mark, I enjoy the mortuary stuff, but I gotta feel like I can do so much more. So I decided, I wanted to start actually going into it. That's what led me to it. Because somebody had said in a previous podcast, a very arrogant person in the previous podcast had stated, you do it because you're just as, you're you want the attention and whatnot. It's like, that's true, but at the same point, like, I feel like, I don't know, I needed to do more than just my job. So that's why I got into it. The second question was in regards to bombing. I've had a few experiences. We've all had our experiences with bombing. It's a thing that happens. It sucks, but it's a part of that thing. That's where you do most of your learning, is during the bombing. Is because during the bombing, that's when, like, you make the connections, in your brain. Like, all right, I didn't like this feeling, so your brain subconsciously starts making connections to find the funny things, so you don't end up in those situations. So bombing, that's where I feel like you really grow. But I've had a few experiences with it. One of the more recognizable experiences, or mostly, like, for me, it was just a fucking terrible situation. It was not too long ago before all this shit happened. It was a show out in the desert. It was with me and Tito. I ended up booking Jonathan Tynes and Joel Powers, and they went out there, and they did great, man. They had a great set, and I went up pretty late. I got to close out the show because I wasn't feeling like going up early that day. One of the few times I didn't feel like going up early, and so I had to close out the show, and they were not wanting to hear my death material, man. It was pretty fucking crazy. So, like, that was one experience there. Hold on a second here. All right, I had to pause there for a second. I had someone coming up to the death van. So yeah, bombing. It was a show out in the high desert. I had those guys on, and I had to go up last, and they were not wanting to hear the death material. It was such a painful, like, cringing moment for me. And so, like, I tried to go into other material, and they weren't hearing any of it, really. At that point, like, they were done with the show, and I was not closing material for them anyways. So that was, like, one of the worst experiences I think I had with bombing. But like I said, you learn so much in those moments. Like, they're very important to go through that, and it's where you grow. In that moment, like, I felt like I grew 10 times that day. It was really horrible. It was, like, really just a horrible moment for me. But you learn in those moments. So those are the two questions. Those are my answers. Again, I'm Juan Cias. Thank you guys so much for listening to my voice and to Aaron Chase's podcast. All right, you guys take care. Be safe out there.